Imagine a single, tiny, intermittent flaw in a complex manufacturing line. What if I told you there are two paths forward from that moment? One path leads to a minor hiccup, quickly solved. The other leads to a complete catastrophe. We're going to explore both of those timelines, and the difference between them is absolutely staggering. So let's just cut right to it. What if one tiny, almost invisible flaw on a little plastic part could end up costing your company over $43,000 to fix? I know, it sounds crazy, but as we're about to see, it's frighteningly realistic. And that 43 grand, believe it or not, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The real number at risk here, the entire annual contract value for this part, was a whopping $2.8 million. This is what happens when a small problem spirals out of control in a really high-stakes industry. All right, so let's set the scene. We're inside a medical device manufacturing plant. Now, this isn't just any factory. It's an ISO 1345 certified facility, and that is a really big deal. It means every single change to a process, no matter how small, has to be documented, justified, and validated. And of course, to make things even more stressful, they have a huge customer audit just 10 days away. Talk about pressure. So what's the big problem? It's these things called flow lines that are popping up, but only sometimes, on this plastic housing for a patient monitor. This is a part they make thousands of, and their customers incredibly strict. If more than 2% of the parts have this flaw, the customer rejects the entire shipment. Right now, the team is seeing defect rates spiking as high as 18%. Yikes. Okay, so like any good whodunit, our little defect here has a whole lineup of the usual suspects. The team's got to figure out what's causing these marks, but because it's an intermittent problem, well, that means it's a real head-scratcher. Just so we're all on the same page here, what are flow lines? Basically, they're just visible streaks you can see on the plastic. They happen when the hot, molten plastic cools down unevenly as it's filling up the mold. Kind of like when you see ripples in water, but imagine those ripples getting frozen solid. Okay, so this is where the detective work really kicks in. A technician might look at this list and immediately start messing with the melt temperature or injection speed. Those are the usual culprits, right? But here's the crucial clue that's so easy to miss. The problem is intermittent. It comes and goes. That should be a huge red flag that it's probably something that fluctuates, like cooling or maybe moisture. That's the key right there. All right, with all that in mind, let's dive into timeline A, and we're going to call this one the chaos. This is what happens when a team relies on gut feelings and a bunch of disconnected, isolated adjustments. And oh boy, what a mess it becomes. Over the next 3 weeks, you've got different people on different shifts, all taking a crack at it. The supervisor bumps up the melt temp. A technician named Carlos cranks up the injection speed. Then Priya comes in and messes with the packing pressure, which, get this, actually creates a brand new defect. And finally, Jason thinks it might be moisture, so he starts changing the dryer settings. See the problem? Everyone's trying to be a hero, but nobody's seeing the whole picture. And this chart right here shows the disastrous result. It's something called parameter drift. The process is now so far from where it was originally validated to be. Not only is the original problem still there, but they've created a much, much bigger one. They've totally lost control of their own process. This is an auditor's absolute nightmare. So, finally, the quality engineer has to get involved, and she can't just hit the reset button because the original problem is still hiding in there somewhere. Her only move is to run this really systematic, but super expensive and time-consuming thing called a design of experiments, or DOE. It takes her 2 full, grueling 12-hour days to get it done. And after all that effort, bingo, here it is, the smoking gun. The DOE finally reveals the true culprit wasn't any of those settings the technicians were messing with. Nope, it was something they weren't even looking at. Some of the cooling channels in the mold were partially blocked. The water just wasn't flowing right, which caused that uneven cooling we talked about. That was the cause all along. Okay, now let's hit the big rewind button on this whole story. What if, from the very first minute, they didn't guess? What if data guided that first decision? Well, welcome to Timeline B, the clarity. So in this version of reality, on day 1, the supervisor sees the defect and does something completely different. Before she even thinks about touching a single setting on that machine, she consults an AI-powered knowledge engine to analyze the problem for her. And just look at this. In seconds, not days, not weeks, she gets this diagnosis. The system immediately flags that an intermittent problem with otherwise stable settings strongly points to a cooling issue, not a process problem. It nailed the most likely cause right out of the gate. But honestly, this next part is the real game changer. The system gives a critical warning. Do not touch the melt temp, injection speed, or packing pressure. This one piece of advice right here is what prevents that whole parameter drift disaster we saw in the first timeline. It stops the chaos before it even has a chance to start. And with that one simple warning, look how incredibly easy the fix becomes. The supervisor just calls the mold tech, the tech confirms the blockage in like 30 minutes, they pull the mold, clean it out, and it's back up and running the very next day. And the defect rate, it drops to almost nothing. Just problem solved. Done. So now for the moment of truth. Let's put these two timelines head to head. The tail of the tape. Let's see the real hard numbers that separate chaos from clarity. Okay, prepare yourself because this is just staggering. This is the total cost to fix the exact same problem. In Timeline A, the path of chaos, it costs them $43,000. In Timeline B, the path of clarity, under $2,000. That is a cost reduction of more than 95%. Just wow. And the final scorecard really tells the whole story, doesn't it? Resolution time, 17 days versus 1 day. The cost of all that scrap plastic, almost 35 grand versus less than 2. How many wrong adjustments were made? 5 versus 0. And here's the kicker. The process validation status went from completely compromised to perfectly intact, and the risk to that $2.8 million contract went from high to none. It's not even close. And this really brings us to a much bigger point. Because in these highly regulated industries, think medical, think aerospace, preventing that parameter drift isn't just about saving a few bucks on scrap parts. It's about something much more important. Because this is the question that will send a chill down your spine. An auditor comes in, looks at your records, and says, so, why was the melt temperature increased by 15 degrees? And where's the change control record? Answering, some guy on the night shift was trying to fix something. That is a massive, massive compliance failure. And that, right there, is the ultimate lesson. In these kinds of high-stakes games, keeping your process locked into its validated compliant state, that's the real prize. That might be the most valuable outcome of all, even more than the cash you save. So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about for your own team, your own facility. When the pressure's on and the alarms are going off, is your team guessing or are they knowing? Because as we just saw, the difference between those two isn't just a little bit, it's absolutely enormous.